When I was a child, my parents would sometimes take me to my aunt and uncle's house for the weekend. Most of the time I played with my two cousins. We were about the same age. They lived on a small farm. We ran around the farm and did whatever we wanted. Sometimes we ran away to a neighboring farm. It had been abandoned for 10 years, no less. Abandoned buildings and other structures were simply begging to be explored. It was certainly a paradise for three boys looking for adventure, especially after my cousins told me the story of how the farm was abandoned. The story was quite classic. The owner of the farm went crazy and hacked to death his entire family with an axe, hanged himself, and every night his evil spirit prowls the night in search of new victims. Great horror movie. Even at that age, I understood that this was most likely a fictional story based on speculation and rumors. But the story was so good on its own that I bought it. One afternoon, we decided to play hide and seek. When it was my turn to hide, I ran into a dilapidated barn with a small living space on top and climbed the stairs to find a good spot. There was still furniture there, moldy and half-rotten, and all sorts of things were scattered on the floor. I made my way through the unwashed dishes, tattered clothes and stacks of books to a small bedroom with a closet. Jackpot. There were even long black dresses hanging in the closet, among which I could hide. I climbed inside and was able to close the folding doors of the closet. The only source of light for me was a strip of light coming through the crack of the door from the window. I squatted down and waited. A little time passed. No one found me. I waited a little longer, wondering if I should come out of my hiding place yet. I was bored. My head dropped. I woke up abruptly. There was absolute darkness all around. Woke up. I did not immediately remember where I was and what I was doing here. It slowly began to dawn on me that it was already night and that I was left in an abandoned house. Fear gripped me. I tried to get up, but my numb legs gave way and I fell. I stretched my legs, waiting to feel them, when suddenly I heard the sound of the closing door below and instantly froze. Could it be one of my cousins? At first it was quiet, then I heard footsteps on the stairs. But not just steps. They could not belong to a child. These were the heavy, slow steps of an adult. Step, 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 step. I held my breath, praying for the footsteps to stop. But they were getting closer. The sound of footsteps reached the top of the stairs. Step, 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 step. A minute later, the footsteps started again, this time with a repeated creaking sound, like something being dragged across the floor. Creak, step, 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 creak, step, step. Footsteps wandered aimlessly across the floor, moving from room to room. I thought I smelled a putrid odor. The constant scratching sound sent chills through my body. My worst fears were realized when footsteps reached the bedroom door. Creak, step, step, creak, creak, step, step. They came closer and closer, and finally stopped right in front of the closet door. I couldn't see who it was. After an agonizing pause, they continued, walked to the other side of the room and disappeared through the door. Then I heard their retreating sound in the corridor. Creak, step, step, creak, step, step. I waited for what seemed like an eternity. There were no more sounds, and I mustered up the courage to open the door and go outside. And then, three things happened simultaneously. I was overcome by an overwhelming smell that I can only describe as the smell of a roadside animal. I heard heavy, hoarse breathing behind me in the closet and felt hot breath on the back of my head. I rushed to run away from this nightmare place, trying to get out of the house in the moonlight from memory. All this time, while I was running, I felt a pursuit behind me, which was approaching me with terrifying speed. Step, step, creak, step, step, crack. It was a frantic, clumsy escape, with me falling, tripping and hitting things as I made my way almost blindly. I didn't dare look back, at least not until I was running out the front door of the barn and outside. Then I turned around and saw absolutely nothing. There were no more sounds of footsteps. Nobody was chasing me, but that didn't stop me, and I continued running until I reached my aunt and uncle's house. There was a police car there. My parents were there too, and were terribly worried. Everyone attacked me asking where I had been. Apparently, when my brothers didn't find me, they returned home and told their parents everything. They finally called the police and were about to search all the buildings on the farm. Years later, one of my cousins told me what really happened that evening. He and his brother searched for me for several hours, but they didn't dare tell anyone that they thought they saw me in the window of one of the buildings. This was the bedroom in which I hid. When they got closer, they saw that it wasn't me. A boy stood at the window, smiled at them and waved at them, inviting them to come inside. That's when they ran home. And all this time, I slept in the closet. I am 16 years old. I live on the very outskirts of the city. Not the best area, but nevertheless, as a child, my friends and I ran, jumped and walked here. It was deep autumn outside. The month of November was the holidays. In order to somehow pass the time, my friends and I, for the sake of extreme sports, decided to break into the old, long-closed city morgue. It was abandoned, so there was nothing to be afraid of, but we were sorely mistaken. We agreed to meet near my house. Since the morgue was nearby, we could easily walk to it. There were 4 of us: me, Maxim, Oleg, and Kirill. The parents were not told anything. It was already quite late. It was 10:30 at night. We agreed not to take a lot of things with us. Each of us took a mobile phone and flashlights. After all 4 of us gathered, we set off to what would later turn out to be a hellish place. Half an hour later, we reached the city morgue. His appearance was terrifying. Cracks in the walls, broken windows here and there, a broken roof. The morgue consisted of 3 floors. Kirill said that this morgue was closed back in 1969. I wondered how he knew this, to which Kirill replied that his grandfather, who worked there as a watchman, told him this. Plucking up our courage, we slowly approached the main entrance of the city morgue. Only now I understand that we shouldn't have gone there. Maxim opened the door. It also seemed strange to us that the door was not closed. We turned on our flashlights. The building, from the inside out, seemed dilapidated. 4 beams of flashlights helped us to see a rather long T-shaped corridor. There were stretchers on wheels along the entire corridor. Plucking up courage, my 3 friends and I moved forward. This is where something that torments me to this day began. We heard strange footsteps somewhere deep in the 3rd floor. Did you hear that? Oleg asked in a frightened voice. What did you hear? I asked. Steps, Oleg continued to say. We began to reassure our friend, saying that it seemed to him and nothing bad could happen. We were still standing on the 1st floor. We could see the guard's closet. The door of the closet was open and there were open books and magazines in it. The creepy footsteps and scratching of the walls were heard again. We felt very scared, but we still went up to the 2nd floor. The 2nd level was the same as the 1st. There were rooms, many rooms, as well as a stretcher with wheel. There had been no electricity for a long time, since 1969, so we never turned off our flashlights for a second. Again, we heard stomping and scratching of walls, but more clearly than on the 1st level. We felt uneasy. What could it be? We didn't know this. Barely moving our leg, we began to climb to the 3rd floor. What we saw there remained in our memory forever. All the walls were splattered with blood. Something like, "You will all die," was written on them in blood. We looked at this horror and were in shock for several minutes. Once again, we heard frightening footsteps behind us. We turned around and saw a creature that looked like a man. His eyes were black. Even the whites and corneas were missing. His whole face was covered in scars and cuts. Blood flowed slowly. It opened its mouth and we saw sharp teeth arranged in several rows. We screamed and started running towards the exit. We were already on the 2nd floor when Maxim fell to the floor and screamed. But there was no time to cry and panic. We needed to get out of this terrible place. Together with Oleg, I picked up Maxim and we helped him walk. We quickly ran to the exit. Kirill illuminated our path with a flashlight. The creature was slowly approaching us. He had nothing in his hands. We wanted to get out through the main exit, but somehow it was tightly closed and littered with all sorts of nonsense. We didn't have time to clear the way, so we ran into the guard's closet and closed the door with the help of a shovel that stood in the corner. It seemed like we had broken away. At least it seemed so to us, but this was far from the end. I looked at Maxim's leg. It turns out that he ran into the glass, so he fell to the floor and screamed. The clock showed exactly 1 in the morning, but we didn't have the courage to risk leaving the closet. We sat like that until 3 o'clock in the morning. Then again we heard the terrifying steps of that creature. Maxim was bleeding from his leg. Oleg had a handkerchief in his pocket. He pulled it out and tied up Maxim's wound. "Hold on, buddy," I often repeated to my friend, but Maxim did not lose heart. After a while we heard that the creature was approaching the watchman's closet. It knocked on the glass, but the glass was quite strong, and that made us happy. The knocking on the glass and the scratching of the wooden door were heard again, but this did not last long. After the knocking stopped, it became even more scary. What if this creature breaks in here? What will we do then? We prayed that this wouldn't happen. The clock showed 7:30 in the morning. It was already getting light outside, and we hadn't heard that creature for quite some time. We risked getting up. We saw that the rays of the morning sun were illuminating the foyer of the morgue. They put Maxim on a chair, and the 3 of them began to clear the rubble. After we cleared the rubble, we were able to open the door, and finally we got out of this hell. They quickly fled to their home. At home, after that terrible night, I rested and came to my senses. Until now, I was not at ease. I thought the horror was finally over, but I was wrong. A week later, I learned that Oleg died under rather strange circumstances. He was hit by a car. A week and a half later, Maxim committed suicide, jumped out of a 9th floor window, and a month later, Kirill was found hanged in his old barn. I became very scared. I could not understand all these events, the deaths of my friend. I remembered the inscription on the wall of the morgue and realized I'm next.